Hi everyone. Welcome back to another chapter review of the American Yawp textbook. This is chapter 7, the Early Republic, and this period covers the first few decades of the United States as an independent nation. We'll take a look at political, social, and economic changes that shaped the country. We'll talk about more of the rise of political parties and a little bit of territorial expansion. So let's get started with chapter 7. Now, after the ratification of the U.S. Constitution, the nation's early leaders faced the daunting task of turning theory into practice. Think of the Constitution as being a blueprint. Now we have to build the house. George Washington had unanimously been elected president in 1789. It set the stage for a new government, but even during Washington's presidency, deep political divisions began to emerge, usually over interpretations of the Constitution. Strong national government, weak national government, loose interpretation, strict interpretation, things we've talked about, this argument between Federalists and Anti-Federalists, Federalist, Democratic, Republicans. Now, two distinct political factions are taking shape. Again, the Federalists, led by Alexander Hamilton. They believed in a strong central government, national bank, close ties with Great Britain. And on the other side, you had the Democratic Republicans, led by Thomas Jefferson, and eventually by James Madison. Madison originally starts off as a Federalist, but he begins to see some things during the Adams administration that gets him to change his viewpoints on this national government issue. He's the father of the Constitution, after all, and he starts to see sort of his baby becoming interpreted in ways he did not really see it happening, or the way he didn't, anticipate. Now, the Democratic Republicans, they champion states' rights, a more agrarian-based economy, closer ties with France. And so that's a lot of things that's dividing these two sectors of the American political populace. Now, these differences gave rise to America's first political parties, and the debates over the role of the federal government, foreign relations, economic policies would shape the country for many years to come. Now, one of the earliest challenges to federal authority came in the form of the Whiskey Rebellion in 1794. The federal government, under Alexander Hamilton's financial plan, he's Secretary of the Treasury, he goes to Congress and he says, listen, we need to raise some money. We need to absorb the state debts and create a national debt. It's going to make it better for other nations to loan us money because we will have an established line of credit, something that Secretary of the State, Thomas Jefferson, is not real happy about and disagrees in many ways with Hamilton. So he says we need an excise tax on whiskey. And whiskey is going to hit farmers hard because they're taking their crop, they're making whiskey out of it. It makes it easier to transport large amounts of product to market, and they're making it for themselves to drink. Well, the problem with an excise tax is everything gets taxed. What you sell, okay, sales tax, no big deal. You're also getting taxed on what you keep. And this is predominantly Democratic Republicans that are making the whiskey. They're not Federalists producing whiskey. This is a political weapon by Hamilton on these people that are in the other political party that are disagreeing with him on his plans. So again, I kind of view it as a political weapon. You may see it a little differently, but that's how I see it. So what is the Whiskey Rebellion? Angry farmers in western Pennsylvania are going to rebel against the tax. And in response, President Washington sends federal troops to put down the revolt, something that it could not do during Shays' Rebellion. This marked one of the first major tests of the federal power under the new Constitution, and Washington's decisive action demonstrates that the federal government could enforce and would enforce its laws. Now, while the rebellion was quashed, it did expose the territorial tension between rural farmers and urban elites, who basically control the government, a theme that would continue throughout American history. Now, one of the most significant developments during this period is going to be the expansion of the nation's territory. Now, Thomas Jefferson is elected in 1803, and I'm going to put a video down in the comments that deals with that election. Keith Hughes can give a good example of why this is a crazy election, and we're going to have to change the Constitution because of it. Because coming out of the election of 1800, there is a tie. Who solves the ties if there's a tie for the presidency in the Electoral College? It's going to be the House of Representatives. So he's going to do a pretty good job discussing that and some of this Federalist, Anti-Federalist lingerings that are still there. So that'll be down in the comments. But in 1803, Thomas Jefferson is president. He realizes that trade down the Mississippi River is essential. And we've had to deal with the Spanish for a while to use the port of New Orleans. But by the time we get to 1801, 1802, 1803, France now controls New Orleans. We don't have a deal with France. So Thomas Jefferson is going to reach out through his ambassadors to the French and say, listen, we'll buy New Orleans. We'll buy the eastern side of the Mississippi River, that part of Louisiana. We'll pay you $10 million for it. This has been approved by Congress. But because of the war that France and England are fighting in Europe, the fact that there's been a revolution that broke out in Haiti, Napoleon Bonaparte realizes that he cannot hold on to this massive amount of land in North America, and so he offers to sell all of Louisiana for $15 million. Now, there's questions here about the constitutionality of it. Thomas Jefferson has some interesting ways to sort of get around that. So this Louisiana Purchase doubles the size of the United States, changes the course of American history. But it fits into Jefferson's worldview that the future of the nation is small farmers, land-owning Americans. Now, Jefferson bought the vast Louisiana Purchase from France. As I said, doubles the United States overnight. And the purchase gave Americans control of the Mississippi River all the way down, New Orleans included. And it opened up vast territory, vast lands for westward expansion. But it's going to raise some questions. Where will slavery spread to? What about Native Americans that live there? What about individuals that are in that area that are either Spanish or French citizens? Well, these are questions that are going to be answered and need to be answered. And some of them take a little longer to answer than others. So to explore the new territory, Jefferson is going to send Meriwether Lewis, who was his personal secretary, and William Clark, member of the military and brother of the famous war hero George Rogers Clark, on their famous expedition, the Corps of Discovery, or the Lewis and Clark expedition. They travel over 8,000 miles. They map the new lands. They establish the American presence in the West, bring back information about weather patterns and natural resources and who's living out there and what kind of negotiations can be made with the native peoples. They were gone so long that when they arrived back, everybody thought they were dead. So there was great rejoicing when they arrived back, not dead. So, now what about the Native American resistance in the West? As settlers are moving west into Ohio and other places, they begin to encounter resistance from Native American tribes. Now, one of the most notable Native American leaders is Tecumseh. He's a Shawnee chief, which were known to live in the areas of what is today Kentucky and maybe up into the Great Lakes region. Tecumseh is a Shawnee chief, and he sought to unite the tribes in resistance against American expansion. And Tecumseh is going to form a confederacy. There's that word again, a loose union. And it fought against U.S. forces in the early 19th century. It culminates in the Battle of Tippecanoe in 1811, where U.S. forces led by William Henry Harrison, future short-term president of the United States, and it defeated the Native Alliance there. And the conflict is going to highlight the ongoing struggle over land and the government's aggressive policies toward Native Americans. Now, the expansion westward would continue. It would often at the expense of Native American tribes, and the U.S. government is going to encourage settlement. They're going to seek control over vast areas by having people live there. It's been the British model pretty much all along since the establishment of Jamestown, but it is going to fuel future conflicts. Now, by the early 1800s, tension is breaking out between Britain again. And if you were in class with me, we talked about the issue of impressment. This is going to lead to the War of 1812. Impressment was the stopping of American ships, taking American sailors into the British Navy. And the British had what they viewed as a good reason to do this. There was also issues with American trade. We were being interfered by the British and to the French for some part, but the British are really the ones that are the greatest culprits. We also still have British soldiers on the frontier. We have Native Americans that are rising up against frontier settlements, and we believe that the British are encouraging them to do so. So the War of 1812 breaks out under an administration of President James Madison, father of the Constitution, former Federalist, now Anti-Federalist. He's hesitant to go to war, but his party is pushing him into this because, again, they're stopping our ships and we're doing nothing about it. Shouldn't we assert ourselves, establish ourselves as an equal on the world stage, even if it means going to war with England again? So the War of 1812, it's often overlooked, but it had significant consequences for this young nation. Now, the Treaty of Ghent ended the war in 1815 without major changes, but the conflict does give rise to a new American nationalism. For example, The White House in the city of Washington gets burned. And when that happens, we're gonna have to ask the question: what do we do? How do we deal with these devastating losses? But then we also see battles at Fort McHenry, and from that we see the writing of the Star Spangled Banner. It would become our national anthem eventually. And then the Battle of New Orleans, the last real fight in this, in January of 1815. We're going to see a massive American victory, and we're going to see the rise of war heroes like Andrew Jackson, who fights the Battle of New Orleans, and who's going to be future president of the United States. Now, the war had its ups and it had its downs, but it helped to unify the nation. It fosters a sense of pride. We stood our own against the British, and we didn't lose. We didn't win, but we didn't lose. Status quo antebellum, as it was before the war. We gained nothing, they gained nothing, but we stood our own against this nation that we thought very seriously. Our view on the matter is they are not giving us the respect that we deserve on the world stage. Now, after the war, the United States experiences a period of economic growth and nationalism, and the government will be led by figures like Henry Clay, and they're going to promote things like the American system. It aimed to build infrastructure, support industry, and to establish a new national bank, the first of which had died during the war with England, the War of 1812. Roads, canals, and other internal improvements are going to help to connect the growing nation. It's going to facilitate trade. You're going to see the expansion of the American economy. Collectively, sometimes we call this the market economy or the market revolution. And the rise of factories and new transportation networks. These are going to transform the American economy, making it more interconnected and more productive. So, there you have it. There's a brief rundown of Chapter 7 of the American Yawp. This chapter is called the Early Republic because that's exactly what it's covering. There's a lot of growing pains happening here. And there's a lot of things that I did not discuss in a 15-minute video. So be sure you're reading. Be sure you're getting into that. Use the resources I've given you in class if you are one of my students this current semester, this current term, and reach out to me if you have anything. Come see me, and I'll see if I can answer it for you. So that's where we are. Political party conflict, westward expansion, wars and economic development, all of this is going to set the stage for the nation's future. So if you found this to be helpful, let me know about it, and I will see you down the road as we continue our conversation of early American history. Take care.